Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the book The Only Witness, which is a Christian historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud of Turin over the last two millennia. Today, we're speaking with Marco Ginatta. He is a longtime researcher and speaker on the Shroud, and we met at the recent Shroud conference that took place in St. Louis. Welcome, Marco. It's so good to have you today.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So let me tell you a little bit about Marco. So he was born in Turin. It's not fair that he is right there in Turin, and I'm here in the U.S. and he's right there. So he was born in Turin in 1940. Right in the middle of World War II. He discovered skiing as a child during World War II and went on to become a junior ski jumping champion of Piedmont. His academic path spanned economics and metallurgy, and he did that in both Turin and in Colorado, and followed that with a career in electrochemical technologies and titanium innovation. Later, he turned to theology and philosophy, dedicating his life to studying and publishing works on the Holy Shroud of Turin, merging science, faith, and personal passion. Marco, that's such a great background, and I'm so glad to have you today. I'm so much looking forward to hearing about you and about your thoughts and experiences with the Shroud. So let's get started. What is your backstory on the Shroud of Turin? How did you get involved in that?
Thank you. Okay. I was born and raised in Turin. And when I was a child in the 50s, my grandmother, who was a student of Holy Shroud, and I inherited many books from her, on important occasions, she used to take me to worship the Holy Shroud in the Cathedral of Turin. At that time, the Holy Shroud was very well kept in the Guarini Chapel, certainly you've seen it. That, that had been specifically built by the Savoy family for the Holy Shroud. It was located at an elevation with respect to the cathedral altar and gave an impression of spiritual height. While illustrating to me, my grandmother led me to the black stairs from the floor of the cathedral to the Guarini Chapel. The climb seemed effortless, with the elevation feeling, because the stairs were well designed, really well designed. With the emotion of transcendence, entering the Guarini Chapel to see above an altar, behind a double series of thick iron grills, the box in which the rolled up Holy Shroud was kept. My grandmother explained the major characteristic of the Holy Shroud to me, and that was fascinating, helped me to think about my personal resurrection. Progressing with years along, I am becoming more curious on the characteristics of the life after death. I recall that the veneration of the Holy Shroud was intensely emotional, considering that it is the only true portrait of Jesus we have. Later on 2015, on the occasion of ostensions, I began the publication of my book, Technical, on the material result of Jesus' resurrection. And at the University of Third Age, I started delivering the course of Holy Shroud, which I also offered the information about passing away as the discussion led us. In particular, I like to recall Jesus' answer to the good thief. Today you will be with me in paradise, not in a billion years. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's that last statement of Jesus to the good thief is so powerful for all of us that even as a thief, we can still with the with repentance that we can end up with him in heaven. So you and I met at the Shroud conference, the Sikh conference, the Shroud Educational Endeavors Corporation conference in St. Louis just a month or two ago. So what were your thoughts about the conference?
Oh, was a very well organized event. Really exceedingly nice. 5 days, 425 participating people, 85 lecturers. Really something never seen before. And we attendees all over the world coming. The speakers presented the results of their scientific research. I had the opportunity of getting to know and talking with many scientists. I appreciating the scientific grandness of the special characteristic of the image. So it's really something that confirmed never seen before, so beautiful.
Yeah, it certainly was. So what were the most interesting presentations? And did you learn anything new from the conference?
Yes, that was really fascinating. The quantistic physics model explaining the image of Jesus on the shroud. I think in the future we're going to deepen and understand it better.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. So what kind of research are you working on now?
This is very unfortunate. Regrettably, in Turin we have no research going on. Just we are planning to understand one peculiar research, an observation of the original. Certainly, you know that as an optical characteristics of the image cannot be read it. You cannot read it the original in a close-up distance. If you go less than a foot, impossible. Instead, when you distance over 3 meters away, the image is clear. So we have to understand this phenomenon, what's all about, eventually which kind of information gives us. But we didn't start it yet. That's just the opposite of a common imaging, which is
Mm.
as you walk closer, you get better. That's something very much important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how your eyes can perceive certain things from a distance, and in this case, when you get closer and closer, you can't see it. You can't recognize what you're looking at, and you have to be about 6 feet away or so from the shroud to be able to see that image in detail. And it's such an unusual thing, and certainly if a forger were going to paint that image in that way, it's almost impossible to think how he would do that. Would he have a 6 foot long paintbrush
Yeah.
to be able to do it? I just don't know. So very, very interesting and an unusual characteristic of the image on the shroud. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is that the shroud is not really considered to be part of theology. Why do you think that? What do you think is the reason behind that?
I have the a thought of Professor Tanzaniti, who is teaching University Holy Cross in Rome, which is also a doctor in physics and studied the shroud in detail. A very good friend of mine, been discussing many times. In fact, he is the one writing many books. I'm just taking part of this publication and repeating it. Fundamental theology is certainly interested in examining extra biblical sources that can provide information regarding Jesus of Nazareth and the religious movement he founded. The important purpose of such information is to allow, within the limits of its reliability, an historical access to the question of the kerygma, which is, if Christ be not risen, then is our preaching vain? Is your faith also vain? 1 Corinthians 15:14. Without it, the entire apostolic preaching would be jeopardized. The extra-biblical literature about Jesus, as poor and fragmented it can be, archaeology, iconography, epigraphy, are usually considered an integral part of these sources. In principle, one could wonder if the funeral cloth that is preserved in Turin, commonly known as the Shroud of Turin, has all the requirements that are needed to be listed among those sources. The question about the Holy Shroud nature and its understanding is undoubtedly alive within many scientific contexts as well as pastoral ones, but probably is not so frequent in a strictly theological context. As I say, many ecclesiastics I know will not take side.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that quote from a passage of Corinthians is so true as if there was no resurrection, would there be no Christianity? And the resurrection is the singular most important thing, not only for Christianity, but for all mankind. So now there's an interesting concept, and that's called double sentence with double penalty. So what is meant by that, by double sentence with double penalty?
That's a very sad concept, very, very sad. Since is a legal aspect of Jesus' passion, it is very important to emphasize that scourging and crucifying are two different. It's a double sentence, a double punishment, as the shroud image bound confirms. Pilate's intention was to free Jesus after giving him an exemplary lesson, scourging, which he considered sufficient to satisfy the Jews who had brought to the convict to him. Luke 23:22. This, however, claimed the crucifixion, that Pilate coldly and illegally granted it. Incredibly, was the maximum local authority, that was a prefect. In fact, Roman law did not require such a severe scourging as a preliminary to crucifixion, as far as inferred from the shroud. Thus, in fact, had the two punishment for a single guilt, if there were any guilt. In addition, there wasn't any formal charge legally. That's something so very much important because, as you know, this is a unique historical situation specific only for Jesus. This is the greatest sin in the history of man.
Yeah, yeah, it sure is. And it's interesting that you put it that way, where he was sentenced and punished twice. He was sentenced then and punished with the whipping and the scourging, and then he was punished again by the crucifixion. And I just can't imagine what it was like for him, for the human side of him, to suffer through the scourging with over at least 100 scourge marks. and then to be crucified and suffer the ignominious, being hung from the cross, and then the pain, the incredible amount of pain. It's just, it's unthinkable what he went through for us and what he suffered for us. You know, it's interesting. History testifies to the complete awareness of the first disciples, and certainly Saint John was the first one to finally see and believe, is the wording in the Bible, the see and believe. They were truly witnesses of an extraordinary event, and it was transmitted throughout the world over the millennia. Tell us your thoughts there.
Yes, that's exactly, we can say, is a proof of the authenticity since the very beginning. Since the first disciple, as you said, were witnesses of an extraordinary, very important event. It was transmitted over a world and a millennium, such a very extremely serious, important. And I was thinking of that instead some people are still having an incredible serious mistake. Some people are confusing the magnificent meaning of the resurrection of Jesus to the sky from the miserable earthly resuscitating of Lazarus. That is an enormous concept. I notice many times people are mixing the two things. It's incredible.
Yes, yes, definitely. And it even, at first, you don't necessarily understand the difference of the resuscitation of Lazarus versus the resurrection of Jesus. The resuscitation is he is brought to life by someone else, and he is going to die again.
Yes,
Whereas in resurrection, you're brought to life again by yourself or by God, but not to die again. And the difference in the two is absolutely it's like left and right, black and white, up and down.
very good, certainly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in the Bible, interestingly, in any of the editions that you look at, and I know there's one that the CEI 2004 edition, you don't find any term or any writing of what we commonly call the Holy Shroud or the Shroud of Turin as a list of subjects. It's not in the index. It's not anywhere to be found. Tell us what your thoughts are on that.
That was very sad when I realized that the situation was exactly that. Certainly, I didn't go through the entire Bible to check, but even just on the final index of the term of materials, terms, subject matter, there is no mention anything related to a shroud. That is something that I didn't ask, I didn't tell to any ecclesiastic yet because they will immediately say to me that is not the case. But I would have liked to have a few words about the shroud,
Right.
even
It Well, it would be interesting when in John, well, in any of the Gospels, but when they talk about the linen cloths lying there, the Othonia, and it would be interesting that at least in the footnotes or somewhere
yeah,
that it would say, and this is commonly known today as the Holy Shroud or the Shroud of Turin or whatever the appropriate term is. And you're right, it doesn't show up at all there, nowhere, not even in the learning or the teaching Bibles.
I didn't check on Bible in English, just the Italian one, but eventually,
Yeah, no, and I've never seen it either. You only see the cloths lying there or the linens lying there. And it's kind of interesting because here we have, and I'm an authenticist and you're an authenticist, and we both believe that the shroud is, in my opinion, the only witness to the resurrection, but is certainly that impact of that supernatural event that took place. And yet the shroud is not really kept today the shroud itself is, but the museum of the Holy Shroud, and in particular the museum in Turin, is in a very different place than you would expect. So the Egyptian Museum is housed in one of Turin's most important buildings, the Palazzo dei Nobili, and whereas the Holy Shroud Museum is located in the basement of the Church of the Turin Confraternity of the Sudarium, and which is the Sudarium, by the way, is the Jesus's face cloth, which is housed in Oviedo in Spain. And so anyway, it seems like even the name of the museum is not correct. Tell us what tell us why you think that is, and tell us your thoughts around that.
Is a very sad thought because even when we bring some guests visiting Turin, we'd like to show a museum with characteristic more important. Even we go on the cathedral, and the cathedral is not a big church either. All this is really everybody coming in and criticizing afterward.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. If I were going to go to Turin, now that I know you, I'm going to ask, of course. But if I were going to visit Turin and I said to myself, I want to go see the Holy Shroud, I would look for a museum of the Holy Shroud where the shroud, the word, the shroud, is in the name of the museum. I wouldn't necessarily think it would be in the basement of a church. I wouldn't think it would be named Sudarium. So it's actually it's almost doubly or triply hard to find because it's as opposed to the Egyptian museum, which is housed in a beautiful palace. So it's kind of interesting about that.
Yes, yes. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So now one thing that I think scientists and researchers sometimes we go too far and we get so involved in the science as opposed to the theology. And one thing that we really can't do is to separate the scientific research from the religious ones. And it makes a very damaging, regrettable behavioral error for those researchers, since the Holy Shroud is the most important case where science touches faith. That researcher can lose the opportunity of improving his faith and understanding. What do you think about that?
This is one of my favorite points. So in a way that I like to think that we are composed of material and immaterial. The material, everything you can measure part of the body. Immaterial are all things that you cannot measure, just like intelligence, memory, all sorts of things. And what's very important is that using most of the immaterial for something non immediately measurable. In our case, we are arriving to get like on the boundary from material to immaterial. We can see the shroud as at the boundary from the material part and the immaterial. So it started as a material process and went on with the immaterial process that we can today not yet ready to measure on it, but it's so important to have the two components. And if we consider, do not consider the immaterial characteristic, we don't proceed much further in thinking, in making hypotheses. That's why science has fades.
Yeah, and I think researchers can easily, lose the reason behind their research if they leave off the religious and the theological aspects of what it is that they're studying and trying to understand. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So now, one thing too for students of the Holy Shroud. It's almost inconceivable, following up on that question, it's almost inconceivable that they don't go to Holy Mass or don't go to, as a non-Catholic, don't go to, don't go to worship, and potentially don't even receive Holy Communion. It's pretty, that part of it is such an important part of our Christian lives and our religion that we can't leave those off. What do you think about that?
Yes, to me, if one of my people working on the study of the shroud, not going to mass, not doing having the communion, I don't think how we can think deeply about the topics it's working with. He's certainly limiting his own way of, because, as I mentioned just before, is much more open beyond the material part, our, our field of research. If doesn't do that, I mean, what is thinking this fellow?
Mm,
What sort of a, then again, the reason of his writing comes from.
right. Well, it's I really like the your point about the material. So our skin and our bones and what we can feel and our weight and our height and things like that. Then you have the immaterial, your thinking, your memories, and I can't think of anything else. But then the third piece would be also, your soul. And
Mhm.
so you have then different aspects, and it's I really like the way that you separate that out, and I'm going to use that I think in the future when I'm talking about the shroud and the study of the shroud. That's really very interesting. Is there anything else that you'd like to bring up before we close?
That are difficult topics. At times, it's difficult to me to understand why so many agnostic deniers are so cruel. So why? If
Mm,
they not consider it, just keep away. Instead, they insist to write. Have you noticed that during your conference, someone from Brazil came in with the awful paper just to disturb. Same thing.
yes.
We had a small conference in Turin the 6th of September. Again, those days, two awful papers came out in the local paper to disturb, and simple people coming to me, they say, it's true that I have to go back all the way.
Yes, that was the I can't remember his last name, Cicero Menaeus, I
Yes,
think it
yes.
was. And it's funny how there was that coincidence that it was timed exactly when the conference was taking place. And I don't think that was a coincidence, but it certainly, is was very well timed by it came out of I think it was Archaeometry magazine. And and timed exactly when our conference was taking place. It's, I feel sorry for those people that are either agnostic or atheistic, where they then are, believe that, the shroud is false, number one, and then secondly, do they actually believe in the death of Jesus, or do they believe then in the, do they say he died but he wasn't resurrected? There's so much that they lose because of that, in their lives, and then certainly in their afterlife. In any case, it's really, I like the way that you described a couple of things. I liked your concept of the double sentence and the double penalty. I like the way you described the material and the immaterial. That makes so much sense. Marco, thank you so much. It was so good to meet you out at the conference in St. Louis a couple of months ago, and thank you for your comments and your thoughts this morning. And is really very helpful. And I think the audience will find them also very valuable. But for the audience, then please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And if you'd like to, please visit GuyPowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Marco, thank you so much. This was really very interesting.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Oh,
Very, very kind of you.
absolutely, absolutely. Once I met you in St. Louis, I knew I wanted to interview you so that everyone else in our audience would be able to learn of you and your thoughts and perspectives. So thank you.
Again, thank you very much.